I wasn't supposed to see this, but now it's already too late. Because a few years ago, I accidentally ended up at a party in Hollywood. That was never supposed to exist. It all started with one message, 5 words. Hollywood Hills, midnight. Come alone. When I arrived, everything looked normal. A luxury mansion, movie stars, journalists, cameras. But around midnight, some of the guests disappeared. They didn't go home. They went to the basement. I followed them, and there I saw a room that made no sense. An old film projector, cameras, people standing in a circle, and a symbol on the floor. What happened next was recorded on dozens of film reels. Reels that were never meant to be movies. And when I finally found one of those recordings, I realized something terrifying. I thought I was investigating them, but in reality, they had already started filming me. The gate wasn't on any map. Tall iron bars, security cameras watching the road. The driver didn't say a word when we arrived. He just nodded toward the mansion on the hill. Music drifted through the trees, slow, rhythmic, almost like chanting. At the time, I thought it was just another Hollywood party. I was wrong. A few hours earlier, I was sitting at my desk in Los Angeles, going through emails I usually ignored. Press invitations, studio announcements, the usual noise. Then one message caught my eye. No sender, no signature, just 5 words. Private gathering, Hollywood Hills, midnight. Normally, I would delete something like that, but attached to the email was a digital pass and the address of a mansion that didn't appear on public property records. That was strange. In my line of work, strange things are often worth investigating. So a few hours later, I was sitting in the back of a black car, climbing a narrow road into the hills. The higher we drove, the quieter the city became. No street lights, no traffic, just the distant glow of Los Angeles far below. And eventually, the gate. 2 guards stood beside it, dressed in black suits. One of them checked my pass. He didn't ask questions. He didn't even look surprised. He simply opened the gate. And just like that, I was inside. At first, everything looked exactly like you'd expect from a Hollywood gathering. Luxury cars, soft jazz music, guests in expensive suits and dresses, people laughing beside an infinity pool overlooking the entire city. If you've ever seen photos from celebrity parties, this looked exactly the same. But after a few minutes, something began to feel off. People spoke quietly, almost carefully, and every so often, someone would glance toward the same hallway inside the mansion. At the time, it seemed like a small detail. Later, investigators would realize it was the moment everything started to feel wrong. Around midnight, the atmosphere changed. The music outside slowly faded. Some guests began leaving, but others moved inside the house. Not toward the bar, not toward the dance floor, toward that hallway. One by one, almost silently. I followed. The hallway was darker than the rest of the mansion. No music, no conversation, just the soft echo of footsteps on marble. At the end of the corridor was a single door, closed. 2 men stood beside it. Security again. They checked each person before letting them pass. When it was my turn, one of them looked at me for a long moment. Longer than necessary. For a second, I thought he was going to stop me. Instead, he opened the door. Inside was a narrow staircase leading downward, into the basement. And that was the moment I realized something. This wasn't the kind of party you see on magazine covers. This was something else. The basement room was large, much larger than the mansion above suggested. Dim lights flickered against stone walls. Around 30 people stood in a circle. Some faces were familiar: producers, actors, people you've definitely seen on screen. But no one was talking. They were watching the center of the room, where a vintage film projector was running. But it wasn't projecting onto a screen. The film light was aimed at the floor, where a strange geometric symbol had been drawn, and the sound filling the room was not music. It was a low, synchronized chant. At that moment, I didn't understand what I was looking at, but I knew one thing immediately. I was not supposed to be there. I slowly stepped backward toward the staircase, trying not to attract attention, trying to leave quietly. Then, suddenly, the chanting stopped. The projector light flickered, and the entire room fell silent, because someone had noticed me. And a voice from the circle said quietly, "Who invited him?" The chanting stopped instantly. 30 people turned at the same time, and suddenly, the room felt smaller. The man who had spoken stepped forward, tall, perfectly calm, the kind of face you've seen before, but can't quite place. For a second, nobody moved. Then he said something that made my stomach drop. "Security!" 2 men near the staircase turned toward me immediately. Not aggressively, not loudly, just efficiently. That's what made it worse. Because this didn't feel like a party anymore. It felt like a system. I raised my hands slightly. "Relax," I said. "I think I took the wrong hallway." No one laughed. The tall man studied me carefully. Then his eyes moved to my jacket pocket, where my small recorder was clipped. At that moment, I realized something. I hadn't been invited here by accident, and they knew exactly who I was. The man stepped closer, slow, controlled. "You're a journalist?" It wasn't a question. The room remained completely silent. Then someone near the back spoke quietly. "Let him go." A different voice added, "Too many people here tonight." For a moment, I thought they might argue, but the tall man finally nodded. He leaned closer to me, close enough that only I could hear him. "You saw nothing tonight." His tone wasn't threatening, it was certain, like a rule already written somewhere. Then he stepped aside. The 2 security guards opened the staircase, and just like that, I was allowed to leave. The air outside felt completely different. Cold, sharp, real. I walked quickly toward the driveway. No one followed. No one stopped me, which somehow felt even more unsettling. Because powerful people usually don't let strangers witness something like that and simply walk away. As the car carried me down the hill, I replayed the scene in my mind. The projector, the symbol, the chanting. At first, I told myself it was just a bizarre private ceremony. Hollywood is full of strange people. But one detail refused to leave my thoughts: the projector. It wasn't digital. It was an old 35mm film machine, the kind studios stopped using decades ago. At the time, it seemed like a meaningless detail. Later, it would become one of the most important clues in the entire investigation. The next morning, I started digging. Property records, ownership history, event permits. But the mansion didn't exist on any public listings. Not as a residence, not as a production location, not even as an empty lot, which meant someone had gone to significant effort to erase it. That's when I found something else. An archived newspaper clipping from 1932, a photograph of the same property, back when it belonged to a silent film producer who hosted private gatherings for Hollywood elites. Most of the article was ordinary society gossip, but one sentence stood out. Guests were invited to participate in experimental cinematic rituals exploring the psychological power of moving images. Cinematic rituals. I read that line 3 times because suddenly the projector in the basement didn't seem random anymore. It felt deliberate. And the deeper I searched into early Hollywood history, the stranger things became. Certain names kept appearing. Philosophers, artists, people fascinated by symbolism and hidden meanings. One of those names belonged to a man who believed film could influence human consciousness like a ritual. Aleister Crowley. At first, I assumed it was just historical curiosity, but then I found another name connected to Hollywood's early experimental circles. A brilliant rocket engineer who spent his nights performing unusual ceremonies in the California desert. Jack Parsons. At the time, it felt like a bizarre coincidence. Later, it would start to look like a pattern. 3 days after the party, something unexpected happened. I received another message, different email, different sender, only one sentence. If you want to understand what you saw, start with the film. Attached to the message was a single file, a digitized reel labeled Private Screening, 1974. I almost didn't open it. Something about the message felt wrong, but curiosity won. I pressed play. The footage was grainy, dark, shaking slightly like it had been copied many times. At first, it showed nothing but a circle of people in a dim room. Then, the camera adjusted, and suddenly, I recognized the place. It was the same basement, the same symbol on the floor. But the people standing in the circle included several faces that would later become some of the most powerful figures in Hollywood. And the person holding the camera whispered one sentence. Tonight, the initiation begins. The footage lasted exactly 11 minutes. No title, no explanation, just a grainy camera shaking slightly in someone's hands. For the first few seconds, nothing happened. A circle of people stood in silence. The same room I had seen in the basement, the same stone walls, the same symbol on the floor. But the timestamp in the corner read 1974. And that's when I noticed something else. Some of the faces in the room would later become some of the most powerful people in the film industry. At the center of the circle stood a young man, early 20s, nervous. His hands clenched so tightly, his knuckles looked pale even through the poor camera quality. The camera operator whispered quietly, "First night." Another voice answered, "He's ready." The young man looked around the room, 30 strangers watching him, some in suits, some in masks, none of them smiling. Someone stepped forward and handed him a glass. Not champagne, not wine, just a dark liquid reflecting the projector light. The young actor hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything. Because whatever was happening here, he hadn't expected it. A voice from the circle spoke calmly. "You want the career." Another voice added, "You want the audience." Then the first voice finished the sentence. "Tonight, you prove you belong." The projector in the corner suddenly turned on. Its mechanical hum filled the room, but there was still no screen. The light beam cut across the basement and illuminated the symbol on the floor. The young actor looked confused. One of the men placed a hand on his shoulder. "Stand in the center." The camera moved slightly closer. The actor stepped into the light. The chanting began again, low, rhythmic, exactly like the sound I had heard at the mansion party decades later. That's when I realized something unsettling. Whatever I had seen in that basement had been happening for a long time. The young actor drank from the glass. The people in the circle watched without moving. Then the voice spoke again. "From this moment forward, you belong to the audience, and the audience belongs to us." At the time, the phrase probably sounded symbolic. maybe theatrical. But years later, investigators studying Hollywood's power structure would return to that exact sentence, because it hinted at something larger, something about control, about influence, about the way entertainment shapes millions of people at once. And suddenly, that old projector started to look less like decoration and more like a ritual tool. Halfway through the footage, the camera suddenly tilted, as if the person filming had shifted nervously. The chanting grew louder. The young actor's breathing became faster. The circle slowly tightened around him, step by step, until the projector light surrounded him completely. Then something strange happened. One by one, members of the circle raised their hands, covering one eye. I paused the video, rewound it, played it again. The gesture lasted only a few seconds, but it was deliberate. The exact same gesture that appears in countless celebrity photo shoots today. At the time, it looked like a random motion. Later, it would become one of the most discussed symbols in entertainment culture. The footage ended suddenly. No credits, no explanation, just darkness. I sat there staring at the frozen frame, trying to process what I had just seen. Was it real? A performance? Some bizarre industry tradition? But before I could think further, my phone buzzed. A message from the same anonymous sender. Only 5 words. That was only the beginning. The message continued with one more line. If you want the truth, look at the symbols. At first I didn't understand, but later that night, while reviewing music videos and magazine covers, I began noticing something disturbing. The same gesture, the same eye symbol, again and again and again. And the deeper I looked into Hollywood imagery, the harder it became to believe it was coincidence. At first, I told myself it was nothing, just internet speculation. People love seeing hidden meanings in everything. But the more I looked, the harder it became to ignore. Because once you notice the pattern, you start seeing it everywhere. And when that happens, it becomes impossible to unsee. I spent days reviewing footage, music videos, award shows, fashion shoots, film scenes, thousands of images, frame by frame, slowly, carefully, and certain visuals kept repeating. One eye hidden, hands forming the same strange shapes, symbols placed quietly in the background. At first it felt random, but the repetition was too precise, too consistent. Different studios, different directors, different decades. Yet the same symbols appeared again and again, the same visual language. And suddenly, the footage from 1974 felt less like a bizarre one-off event and more like a piece of a much larger system. One night, I paused a music video at exactly the wrong moment. For a single frame, a strange geometric sign flashed behind the performer, too fast for most people to notice. I rewound it, watched again. There it was. Then I started noticing something else. The same symbol appeared in completely unrelated productions. Different budgets, different countries, different crews. Yet somehow, the same imagery kept resurfacing. That's when a disturbing possibility crossed my mind. What if those symbols weren't artistic choices? What if they were signals? A language designed to be recognized only by people who already knew what it meant. 3 weeks into the investigation, my phone rang. Unknown number. No caller ID. I answered. For several seconds, there was only silence. Then a quiet voice spoke. "You're looking at the wrong thing." My stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" I asked. The voice replied slowly. "The symbols aren't the message. They're just the signal." A long pause followed. Then I asked the obvious question. A signal for who? The voice hesitated. Just long enough to make the answer feel dangerous. Finally, they whispered, "For the people running the room." The call ended, just like that. That night I drove back to the mansion in the hills, not inside, just the road outside the gate. The place looked completely dark. No music, no cars, no movement, like the party had never happened. But as I waited in the shadows of the road, headlights appeared. A truck rolled slowly toward the gate. The guards opened it without hesitation. The truck drove inside. On the side of the vehicle was a company logo. Not catering, not security. A film archive transport service. The kind used to move old cinema reels. And suddenly, I remembered the basement. The projector. The strange light. The message in that anonymous email. Start with the film. The next morning, I contacted several people who worked with archival film. Most refused to speak. Some hung up the moment I mentioned private reels. But one technician finally agreed to meet. He chose a small diner far outside the city. When he arrived, he looked nervous, constantly checking the windows. He didn't order food. He leaned across the table and spoke quietly. "You're asking about certain recordings?" I nodded. He swallowed hard. "Some of those reels." He stopped mid-sentence. His eyes moved toward the door. Then he finished the thought. "Weren't meant to be movies." Before I could ask what he meant, his phone lit up on the table. He glanced at the screen and instantly froze. Every bit of color left his face. He stood up so fast the chair scraped across the floor. "I shouldn't be here." Then he walked straight out of the diner. No explanation, no goodbye, leaving one terrifying question behind. If those reels weren't movies, then what exactly were they recording? I didn't see the technician again. He never answered another call, never replied to another message. And when I returned to the diner 2 days later, the waitress told me something strange. "No one like that has been here before." For a moment, I thought she was joking. She wasn't. At that point, I had two options: walk away or keep digging. Most journalists know the moment when a story starts pushing back. Phones acting strangely, emails disappearing, people suddenly refusing to talk. This investigation had reached that moment, because later that same night, I received another message from the anonymous sender. No greeting, no explanation, just a link and 5 words. "You asked about the recordings." Attached was a short video file. No title, no date, just raw footage. The video opened with the sound of a projector spinning, the same mechanical hum I had heard in the basement. For several seconds, the screen was completely dark. Then, the picture slowly appeared. A room, large, circular, stone walls. The camera moved slightly, like it was hidden in someone's pocket. People stood around the edges of the room, watching, silent, not talking, not moving. The same symbol I had seen before was drawn on the floor, but this time, something else was in the center. A chair, and someone sitting in it. The camera zoomed slightly. The person in the chair looked young, nervous, confused. 2 people stepped forward from the circle. They placed something on the floor beside the chair, a small metal object, shiny under the projector light. I leaned closer to the screen, trying to understand what I was looking at. Then one of the voices spoke, calm, controlled. "You want the audience." Another voice answered, "Tonight, the audience chooses you." The room remained silent. The person in the chair didn't move, didn't speak, like they already understood the rules. Then the projector light suddenly grew brighter, and the chanting began again. The exact same rhythm I had heard the night of the party. At that moment, I paused the video because something inside me already knew. This wasn't entertainment. This wasn't performance art. This was documentation. A recording of something that wasn't meant for the public. Something meant only for the people inside that room. And suddenly, the technician's words echoed in my head. Some of those reels weren't meant to be movies. Halfway through the footage, the camera shifted again, and for a split second, the lens captured something unexpected. Another camera, mounted on a tripod, recording the entire ceremony from a different angle, which meant the person filming this wasn't supposed to be there either. 2 cameras, 2 witnesses, 2 records of the same event. And that raised a terrifying possibility. If there were multiple cameras, then there were probably multiple copies. Just before the video ended, someone in the circle suddenly turned toward the hidden camera, directly toward it, like they knew it was there. The footage cut to black, and seconds later, my phone vibrated again. Another message from the anonymous sender. Only 1 sentence. They know you're watching now. 3 nights after the video, I received another message. Short, urgent. They know you're asking questions. Meet tonight. Bring no one. No name, no explanation. Just a location. A parking area near the Canyon Road outside the city. Time, 2:17 a.m. At that moment, I understood something. Whoever sent this was already in trouble. The parking lot was almost invisible in the fog. No lights, no traffic, just a stretch of asphalt surrounded by dark hills. When I arrived, there was only 1 car. Old. Engine still running. The driver's door opened slowly, and the technician from the diner stepped out. He looked worse than before, eyes darting around the empty road, hands shaking. "We don't have much time," he said. Then he opened his backpack. Inside was a small metal hard drive, black, unmarked. He placed it in my hand. "Everything is here. Ceremonies, meetings, private recordings." I stared at the drive. "How many?" "Dozens." His voice dropped to almost a whisper. "If this gets out..." He glanced nervously toward the road. Everything changes. And that's when the headlights appeared. 2 vehicles turning slowly into the parking lot. No license plates, dark windows. The technician froze. His face went pale. "They found us." He shoved the hard drive into my hands. "Go." The cars accelerated, doors opening, figures stepping out. "Run!" I jumped into my car and slammed the door. The engine roared to life. Gravel scattered across the road as I sped toward the canyon highway. Behind me, the headlights followed. The canyon road twisted through the hills like a black ribbon. Sharp turns, steep drops, and in my rearview mirror, those same 2 headlights. Closer now, closer than before. My phone lost signal. No service. No way to call anyone. For several minutes, the chase continued through the empty mountain road. Then, suddenly, the headlights disappeared behind a curve. Gone. Just darkness again. And silence. I drove another 15 miles before stopping. Far from the city. Far from the canyon. My hands were still shaking as I opened the laptop, plugged in the hard drive. A folder appeared on the screen. Inside were dozens of video files. I opened the first one. The footage loaded slowly. Grainy, dark, but instantly familiar. The same stone room, the same circle of people, the same symbol drawn across the floor. But something was different. The camera angle. It wasn't the recording I had received before. This one was positioned near the back of the room, which meant only one thing. There had been multiple cameras. I dragged the timeline forward, frame by frame. Then, suddenly, the camera turned toward the entrance. The door opened. Someone stepped inside the room. I leaned closer to the screen and felt my stomach drop, because the person walking through that doorway was me, standing exactly where I remembered, watching the ceremony, which meant someone else had been filming that night, filming the entire room, filming the ritual, filming the witness. For weeks, I believed I had uncovered something hidden, something secret, something they never wanted anyone to see. But staring at that footage, another possibility appeared. They knew I was there. They saw me in the doorway, and they let me leave. Not by accident, not by mistake, but on purpose. Which means one thing. For weeks, I thought I was investigating them. But after watching that final recording, I realized something far more unsettling. I wasn't investigating them. They were watching me.